webinar with us. And just a brief bio on Jenaé. Jenaé, since 1980, Jenaé Rubin worked as an ad sales rep, ad director, and publisher for consumer, B2B, and association magazines with and without online components. She has sold locally, nationally, and internationally. And as a consultant, she's worked and trained more than 1,500 sales reps, publishers, and CEOs. And some of her accomplishments include reversing a 5-year revenue in lineage fall in 3 months, increasing sales 41% with the same advertiser base in 1 year, and tripling revenue in 3 years. I am pleased to have Jenaé here again with us today, and today her webinar is going to be about the first call. Thank you very much, and Jenaé, go ahead and take it from here.
Hi, everybody. So today, as Dave mentioned, we're going to talk about the first call, and these are some of the things that are going to be discussed in the today's session. We're going to discover what's important to your prospects, including what you want to know about your competitors. I know a lot of times people who don't go through this stage properly want to ask questions about the competition, and our prospects don't want to answer them, and it's all because of how we approach it and when we ask the questions. The other thing is, when we don't find out what's important to them, our conversations end up being I conversations, or we conversations. We do this, we do that, we are this, and they don't care about you. So when our conversations can be you-focused, this will benefit you because, or you will see that, and you can only get there when your first call is done properly. So we're going to talk about how to make that happen. The other thing we're going to learn how to do is identify their hot buttons. I remember hearing so many times people say, talk to their hot buttons, and I remember thinking, find out what they are. So I'm going to show you today exactly how to find out what their hot buttons are, so you know exactly what to talk to them about. It's not about your product, it's about what's important to them, and they'll tell you, which is the coolest part. And the third thing that I'm going to mention about today's session is, as a result of following the tactics I share with you, you will be able to stop chasing your follow-up calls. It's very frustrating after making a sales call to not be able to get your prospect back on the line again. And this happens time after time again when you go too far in your first call and when you don't end your first call properly. So this is our agenda for today and the main items that we're going to be discussing. As I was preparing this session, I remembered a time that I was making a joint sales call with a salesperson in the Space Coast. We were going to visit a retailer. They had a store right on the road to Cape Canaveral. And when you walk in the store, you see all of these astronaut souvenirs. So it would have been very understandable for us to believe that what they wanted to accomplish was to get more tourists into their shop to sell more of their merchandise. And this just seems so obvious that it would be really easy to have gone into the sale in a different way and not found out that their storefront was just a place for them to put merchandise that they were warehousing and storing, because what they really did and how they really made their money was by customizing the items that they were selling in their storefront and selling them in major quantities. So hoteliers could buy them and, put their hotel logo on it, for example. So what appeared to be their hot buttons and their major interest wasn't at all. And I share this story with you because without focusing on fact-finding in your first call, we go in with all sorts of conceived ideas that may or may not be correct. And what happens is when we go in without saying, my first call is going to be about fact-finding, we don't arm ourselves to be able to counter and avoid objections and obstacles. So what happens in the first calls when we don't really focus on discovery or fact-finding is we end up talking about ourselves, And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this glazed over look from your prospects as you're talking about things, and you know that they're not really with you, and you don't know what to do about it. So today's session is going to be all about how to avoid those obstacles, the glazed looks, how to get your prospects involved, how to find out what their hot buttons are. Before we do that, let's talk for a moment about why we actually skip this stage altogether. And the reason's pretty simple. We're scared. We think, I finally got them on the phone. I finally got them on the phone, or I finally got an appointment with them face-to-face. If I don't take advantage of this time and tell them all about me, then I may never have an opportunity again. It was so hard to get here in the first place. We think that if we don't tell them about ourselves, they won't know why they should be buying our magazine or website as opposed to somebody else's magazine. And ironically, this is exactly the opposite of what is going to happen when we go through this stage. So why bother? Listen to what Jeff Morey of Nursery Retailer said. He calls it interviewing. He said, I used your style of interviewing for the first time. I was surprised my prospect gave me 20 minutes. Obviously, I'll use a lot of this information to respond back with. Jeff, who has come back to me for 3 years in a row now, every year saying, okay, Jenaé, I need a tune-up. And his company, by the way, is growing double digits using the stress-free sales approach. So he's a fabulous reference in this respect. He said, it's not going to work. No one's going to give me the time. And what he found out is that not only does it work, but people give him 20 minutes and more. I have another client who regularly makes sales calls in a small local market, and her appointments are between 60 and 90 minutes of just asking questions. People will not throw you out or try to get you off the phone when you're talking about them. They will throw you out and try to get you off the phone when you're talking about yourself. And that's the big difference. So what I promise you today, if you follow the advice that I share with you, you will gain more trust than if you continue selling the way that you're selling now, which is by talking about yourself exclusively. You will make sales faster, because right now a lot of you are probably chasing your sales, or you make a first sales call and then you can't get them on the phone ever again, or they just throw fake objections at you to make you go away. So you will make sales faster, you will make bigger sales, you will get more renewals, and you will get fewer objections. So these are my promises to you if you follow what it is that I share with you to do. I will share with you one other piece before we go into the details of, well, what are these questions I should be asking and how do I conduct this stage? I call it my Surgeon General's warning. If while you are in this stage you make recommendations or answer objections, you will fail. Because what happens is you will leave the fact-finding stage and you will enter overcoming objections. And you don't want to ever, frankly, overcome objections. What you want to do maybe is address questions that they have, but what you really want to be doing is focusing on showing them how you can help them achieve their goals and overcome their challenges. And the way to do that is by focusing on gathering the information first, because if you leave this stage and you start making recommendations or overcoming objections, if you start making recommendations and it's not the right time, then you're going to end up, in both instances, you leave the fact-finding stage and you can't come back in, so you end up losing the opportunity to get all of the information you want, so that you're prepared not just for the sales call, but you're prepared for the future if and when problems come up then as well. So it's really hard only because you're used to, going about the sale in the respect of, let me come in and show you my magazine and I'll give you my media kit and I'll leave you the rates and and then I'll call you back and I'll chase you until I finally track you down and you finally tell me no to my face or to my voice that you don't want to advertise with me. So since that's probably not working so well, what we're going to do is go into the sale differently. We're going to go in with a set of questions. You don't have to write this down right now. I'm going to go through these. You don't even need to read this right now. I'm just showing it to you because we're going to go through these questions one by one in a moment. What you are going to do, however, is go into the sale with a list of questions in 4 general areas: about them, about their business, about their advertising, and about working with you. And you want to ask the questions generally in this order. Because if you start asking backwards, for example, well, they haven't decided they won't work with you, so they're not going to answer those questions. And that's why you've been getting some of the problems with not finding out competitive information, because you're asking it at the wrong stage of the process. So you start with general questions about them. So when I set up my appointment or when I go in, certainly, I'll sit down, I do this on the phone and face-to-face. It works both ways. Jeff Morey, who I gave you the example of earlier, almost all of his calls are over the phone, and the other girl I told you who spends 60 to 90 minutes in this stage of the sale does it face-to-face. So there are examples on one's a B2B magazine, the other is a consumer regional city magazine, so it works for all of them. Okay, so when I sit down or get on the phone with someone, the first thing I say to them is, what's going to happen? Because I'm leading the conversation as the salesperson. I'm not taking direction for how the sales process is going to proceed from them. I'm directing it. You are directing it. So what I recommend you say is something like this, thanks for the meeting. What I'm going to do now is ask you a whole bunch of questions because I need to find out how we can possibly help you achieve your goals. And then what I'll do, if I see that there's a match, is come back to you with some recommendations that will be very specific to help you achieve your goals and overcome your challenges. And with that, you go into the questions. If you want, you can do a little check-in question. How does that sound to you? Generally, I'm telling you, it's a non-issue. And I know a lot of you are looking at this going, oh, my God, I can't ask all of those questions. This is not even a long fact-finding series of questions. It's actually a pretty short one. And, yes, you can. If you believe in every cell of your being that you know that you have the right to ask these questions, and there's a good and valid reason for you to be asking these questions, then I promise you they will be very comfortable asking them, and especially if you follow the order and don't interfere with your comments, your recommendations, and your overcoming of objections. What you can do, and I recommend that you do, if you have an idea that you are just dying to share with them, and you will, what you want to do is write that down. So whether you're on the phone or you're face-to-face, you want to say something like, I just thought of something that might help you, so just one moment while I make a note of it because I don't want to forget it. Now, what's going to happen when you do this is they're going to now start getting more excited about hearing what it is you have to say because you've just told them that you have an idea that's going to help them. So you're creating desire to listen to you, whereas when you go into a sale and what you do is say, okay, let me tell you about my magazine, or you ask a few cursory questions but nothing to the depth that we're going to ask now, they feel like you don't know them, you don't care about them, they have their guard up because they want to protect themselves against making bad decisions. So let's look at the first set of questions. Okay, about them. Now, it almost seems like these questions are getting to know you relationship questions. I don't believe in establishing relationships as the purpose for a meeting. A relationship is the natural outcome of everything done right. If your prospects feel like you going to like you and you are going to have a good relationship with them. If they feel that you only care about yourself, then, well, no relationship building you're going to be able to do that's going to result in a sale. So let's talk about these questions. What are your responsibilities? Well, this obviously starts to give you an idea how, if you're talking to the right person or not. How long have you been with the company? Well, if someone's been with the company for a very, very long time, they probably have set ways of doing things that they're really comfortable with, as opposed to somebody who's new with the company. And someone who's new with the company, I would ask the follow-up question, how long have you been in the industry? I remember finding out from one of my advertisers, who, by the way, started as an 8th page when I joined the company a million years ago, and within a couple of years was running full pages with me. I remember finding out that he had been an engineer before he owned his store. What does that say to you? If when you ask these questions, someone says to you, I was an engineer or an architect or, anything like that, it says this is a person who likes data, statistics and numbers. I'm really comfortable with those things. Not only am I comfortable with them, I thrive on them. It makes me comfortable in making decisions. So by asking these questions, you're finding out how to interact with the person that you are working with. I remember another person that I had asked the exact same question to, and she said, I've only been in this position for a couple of months, and before I was here, she was director of sales for a hotel, and before I was here, I was art director. So what did this say to me? Oh, my gosh, I got to stay the heck away from numbers with this person, because numbers, artists, they're not numbers people, they're story people. So I have to share with her the benefits that she can receive in the form of stories and testimonials and things that appeal to an artistic sense. How do you use this information? And then the next question I want to know is, are you familiar with my magazine? And I may have mentioned this to you before. I know a lot of you here have been to some of my other sessions. I don't remember if I have. So if I have, you'll hear it again. If I haven't, then it's the first time. If the people you are calling are not familiar with your magazine, that means they've never seen it before, you probably should not be on the phone with them at this point in time or in front of them at this point in time on a sales call. What you really want is for your prospects to know about you before you're there. So what that means is you want to be mailing your magazines, every single issue, to every single one of your prospects. And that means you're mailing out 1,000 magazines or 2,000 magazines. I doubt there's anybody who has that many true prospects. But if you're mailing out 1,000 magazines every issue to your prospects, it means that these people are thinking about you at least once a month if you're monthly, or once every other month if you're bi-monthly. And you're not calling on them that often. So this is like making an extra sales call with no pressure. So that when you do pick up the phone to call them, they're not going to be saying, who are you? Oh, how much is it to advertise? Because what happens is when you call someone and they don't know about you, you're probably hearing an objection within the first seconds of your call. Probably hearing something like, our budget's spent. They don't even know you. And they know that all you want is to sell them. So so you want to make sure they're familiar with your magazine, and you should do that beforehand. But if you're not 100% sure, you want to ask now. In a rare instance where you have to make a sales call and it's face-to-face, and they are not familiar with your magazine, remember the purpose of this first call. This first call's purpose is about gathering information about them. It's not about selling, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. It's a critical component, and whether you go further in the first call or not, this is how your first call should start. So if they're not familiar with your magazine and you've managed to sit down in front of them with someone, then you're going to want to do like a 30-second, I don't even call it commercial, let's say explanation about who you are. So you'll hold your magazine up, you won't give it to them, and you'll say, I published this magazine, it's about this, it's distributed to these people, and I'll talk to you about it more later. And you put it back down by you. If you give it to them, you now change the conversation from being about them to being about you. And while you might think that's a good idea, what happens is when the conversation shifts to being about them, to being about you, you don't get to find out what they need. And now they're in charge of the appointment because they're asking the questions, and you don't want them asking the questions. You don't want them guiding your sales process. You're not going to win if they are guiding the sales process, but you will win if you're guiding it. So you want to start with questions, and that's the first series. The next series of questions will be about their business, and you'll see some C's. I call these C's critical questions. So these are the questions that if you get someone who says, just tell me about yourself, or I have 2 minutes, just tell me what you can tell me right away. Well, first of all, if I get that kind of an objection, I probably don't want to be making any kind of sales presentation anyway. Because the reality, if someone only has like 2 minutes or they're trying to get rid of you before you even start, they're not going to say yes. So if they're not going to say yes, I would rather them not say no. Because if they say no, I lose. I don't want to lose. I want to win. So what I would do if someone was really trying to hurry and rush me is I would say, this just doesn't seem like a good time for you. And frankly, I don't want to just sell you an ad. What I want to do is help you grow your business. And if this isn't the right time for us to chat about how I can possibly help you reach your goals and overcome your obstacles, then I'll just do it another time. And you can either try to schedule one or you can just try again later. I remember one salesperson called me. She was a very good salesperson, too. It was interesting that she called me with this. And she's like, oh, my God, Jenaé, I just had the most horrible experience. I had this person that I cold called to make an appointment on the phone, and he was just screaming at me. And she was really upset because of the way he was. And what I found out was it was her first call, first time she'd ever spoken with him. So I said, you know what? Just wait a week or two and call him back. I guarantee he's not going to even remember you or that conversation. And he didn't. He didn't remember anything about it. He just happened to be having a bad day, and she just happened to have caught him at a really bad moment. You want to make sure that your moments are right when you are working with them, because if the answer is going to be no, don't bother. Spend your time doing something else. So the second set of questions you're going to ask are going to be about their business. And by the way, if you have any questions, you have a little Q&A box on your screen. So just feel free to type in a question anytime. And if I get a question in the middle of the session, I'll answer it then. Otherwise, I'll answer them at the end of the session. Okay. So the next set of questions is going to be about their business. And if you don't know, hopefully you do, how long they've been in business, you want to know that. Now, why do you want to know that? Well, if someone's spick and span brand new, they have a different set of objectives than someone who's been in business for 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. Someone who's brand new, for example, needs to get their name out there. They need people to even know they exist before they can even expect to start, seeing their doors being blown down. So that's the reason for asking these questions. Every one of these questions has a specific purpose. Because if you find out they're new in business, for example, then when it's time for you to share with them how you can help them increase their sales, well, you will know that you need to be talking about this element. And you'll know you need to be talking about this element because they told you that information. Now, the first critical question, and if you're going to cut questions, I do not recommend cutting the critical questions out. I don't recommend cutting any of them out. And in fact, a lot of my clients ask a lot more questions than this, but this is a good place for you to get started. So the next question is, what are your biggest challenges, and what are you doing to overcome them? And this is a critical question because this is what you're going to focus on when you actually talk about yourself. So if someone says to you, well, one of our biggest challenges is bringing in people who have higher disposable incomes, because right now our average sale is $100, and we really would like to bring up our average sale. So let's say they were to say that to you. And let's say you have a magazine that reaches an affluent market. Well, now when it's time for you to talk about your circulation and your distribution, instead of saying, because I would never say anyway, we print this many copies and distribute them in this ways in these locations, because who gives a hoot? They certainly don't. Now what you can say is, what you said to me was, you want to raise the amount of money that the average person spends with you. So it seems to me that you want to reach people who live in, and now you talk about the areas that your magazine covers, right? So it seems to me you want to reach the people who live in these areas because their demographics are a lot higher. You know, they live in the houses that are, $300,000 and up. So it sounds to me like these are the people you want to meet. You want to be focusing all of your marketing efforts on. How does that sound to you? And hopefully they should be, yeah, that's exactly what we need. And then you go, that's exactly what we give you. And that's how you talk about yourself without talking about yourself. But you talk about yourself by saying, this is what you need. It seems to me this is what you need. And you say, great, this is exactly what we can give you. And you only do that when you find out. And that's how you find out what their hot buttons are, because while you're asking these questions, and this is another critical point for you, while you're asking these questions, you're taking really good notes. And it's important because this information you're gathering is going to be useful for now as well as in the future. So, for example, I just had a thought. I don't want to forget it. I did forget it. Oh, shoot. Okay, I'll come back to it when I remember it or not. Okay. So what the biggest challenges are, what you're doing to overcome it. The next question is, what trends are affecting your business positively and what trends are affecting your business negatively? And when I ask this question, I frequently ask it and say, what trends in this local market, in your industry, in the city, in the county, in the country, internationally? It depends how you want to ask the question. You ask questions based on what it is you're going to be able to help them with. So you have to ask leading questions, because all of your questions ultimately are leading you to gather information to help show them how you can help them achieve their goals and overcome their challenges. That's right. I was talking about their hot buttons. So what the words they use, and taking notes, the words they use are their hot buttons. This is a subtlety that makes an enormous difference, and I'm going to give you an example that will probably clarify it very well. So I was talking to one company who calls the sales reps consultants. If when I had been speaking with this company, I had referred to them as salespeople, they would have felt like I didn't understand them, because the connotation of a consultant is so distinctly different from the connotation of a salesperson. So their hot buttons, the secret is their hot buttons are their words. And you don't want to parrot them, but you want to make sure that you take good notes and you write down their words, because their words are going to be the trigger. They're going to make them feel like you understand them and they trust you. The next question you want to ask is about their top priorities. One moment, please. I'll ask about their top priorities, and this is going to help you determine, when you start talking about yourself, exactly how you're going to be able to show them that you can help them. because whatever their top priorities are is what it is you want to be focusing on when you talk about yourself. The same way I showed you how to use your distribution and your circulation in showing them how you can help them raise their ticket prices. You don't know who their target audience is. Obviously, you need to find out that question so you can show them how much of a match you are. Other markets would you like to reach is a question that's important if you have more things that you can offer them that isn't obvious. So, for example, if you publish a magazine in several regions and they have, let's say, their neighboring geographies, so they may not have thought about reaching people in the next city over. That would be an example of what other markets they'd like to reach. From a B2B standpoint, there are also other markets they may like to reach that you may be able to deliver to them. So if you can, you would ask that question. This question is really useful if you're doing ad design, so I'm going to skip it right now because it's not really appropriate for this stage. The next series of questions, and when you get here by this point, they're starting to feel like, wow, you really care about them, and hopefully you do. When they feel like you really care about them, then they're going to be more likely to answer questions that will be about their competitors, that will help you really figure out how you need to address the competition. I don't address competitors head-on the way people think of doing it. So I'll show you what you can do with the answers to these types of questions. So next critical question, first one in this section. What do you like most about the publications you're using? What do they tell you that they like most about those publications? You want to show them that you have that also. Now, the next critical question is like magic. What would you change, if anything, about them? Now, notice I did not say what don't you like about. Okay? What would change, if anything, about those publications? If you are what they would like to change, you now have an edge over your competitors. All you have to do is say something like that you would like a publication that you're doing business with or a publication that you're using to market your business to be this. And I've got great news for you. That's what we do. So it's going to make it even easier for you to achieve your goal. Now, I want you to know, at this stage of the game, if I mention the words achieve your goals, I'm like making this air quote mark, or if I mention the words overcome your challenges, I wouldn't be saying achieve your goals or overcome your challenges, because what's happened is just ask them all of these questions about their business. So now I know what their goals are and I know what their challenges are. So now instead of being general, I'm going to be specific and look back at my notes and hit their hot buttons by using their trigger words. Hope that makes sense, because this is a critical way of really connecting with the people that you are talking to. So, of course, you want to know if they typically plan full-year schedules or by issue. And if they by issue, it's great because it says to you you can get in at any time. If they typically by full-year schedules, it does not mean that you necessarily are out. First of all, you want to know when do they typically do their planning. But if their planning is done, there still may be other ways that you can get a share of the budget. And we talked about that last time, so if you weren't in that session or you've forgotten, you might want to go back to my website where you'll find links to all of the past seminars and listen to the last one to help you figure out how to get in. But again, the purpose of this stage is to arm you with the information you need so that you will be qualified to make easy sales calls. The next question you want to ask is, where are they currently advertising now? Now, frankly, you should know that. A lot of people don't do the work to really make sure that they know where they are already advertising right now. There are companies out there that can do it for you, or you can just create a database. And, you know, when I was out selling, I took every one of my competitors' issues and I created a database. And every month I entered it so I could see at any point in time exactly where my competitors were advertising. I'm actually in the process of putting together a database that'll hold that information for you. So if that interests you, you can contact me separately. But otherwise, just do it yourself. You want to know where they're advertising and what size they're advertising, because that gives you an indication as to how good of a prospect they are and should you even be contacting them in the first place. Then you want to know what they think works best for them and how they know it works. And that's critical, because the how they know it works is going to tell you also how they're going to judge you or not. And then you want to find out, what have you tried that didn't work and how did you know it didn't work? Because, again, you want to set yourself up for success. So a lot of people don't ask the questions that allow them to get the information that help them really figure out what the expectations are and to address the expectations. And this is another area we're going to do that, and you'll see it's a critical question. The last set of questions will be about working with you. So first critical question, and these are things they've never thought of before, certainly never been asked before. So what this means is it may take them a moment to answer your question. I remember I was watching the Johnny Carson show a million years ago, and Johnny Carson had a 7-year-old boy on the show, and he was on the show because he was exceptionally bright. Carson asked the little boy a question, and the little boy sat there and he kind of had his eyes roll up, you know, on the top of his head a little bit, and Carson's just sitting, waiting, and finally he says, so? He said, I'm thinking. And then, of course, Carson had a lot of fun with thinking, my gosh, isn't that a novel concept? You know, what if we adults actually did that a little bit more before we spoke? What you're going to find is some of these questions you will be asking are questions that they have not been asked or questions they have to think about. It's okay for there to be a couple of moments of silence, even 20 or 30 seconds of silence. They will answer the question. Some people need time to think, and you want to give it to them. Because if you don't give it to them, you won't get the answer. And it's okay. They will see that you respect them by waiting for them. Next question, and it's very important how you word this question, is who else is involved in the decision-making process? And the reason the wording is important is I said who else. Because you do not want to say to someone, you're not important. Who's really the person I should be speaking with? You want them to say, I recognize, you're important, and who else is also involved in the process. So what will happen is when you close this meeting, if there is somebody else who's involved in the process, then you'll want to set up your next meeting with both of those people, and I'll show you how to do that when we finish this segment. So this asking the question lets you know how to handle the next stage of the sales process. Then you want to ask another critical question is how will you measure success? And this is really important. I remember speaking with one advertising salesperson who assumed that until she started working with me, she assumed that everybody who did business with her was going to measure success by the number of phone calls they got. And then after she started working with me and asking these questions, she said, wow, Jenaé, I'm so glad I asked this question because they said to me, I'm really looking to just get my name out there because nobody knows about us. So when their numbers were low, she didn't freak out. She wasn't afraid to call them, because they weren't looking for these big numbers that other companies were looking for. If, when you ask this question, an advertising prospect says to you, well, I want to get 50 phone calls from the ad or else it's going to be not worthwhile, And you know that 50 phone calls is highly unrealistic. You have just been given information that you will use you will address it later. Remember the fact-finding warning, right? The Surgeon General's warning. You don't want to address it in this stage. When the time is right, you will want to set reasonable expectations. Face it, if you don't, they will cancel and leave and may not even pay you. So not finding out how they measure success and not addressing unrealistic expectations sets yourself up for all kinds of problems. And of course you want that. And finally, what are your expectations in working with a new publication? Who knows what they're going to say? You know, it could be, well, I want you to call me before every issue. Whatever they tell you, they're telling you how you need to work with them so that they are comfortable working with you. And you don't want to make one-time sales. You want to make, you want to write schedules for everybody, preferably annual schedules for everybody. And the only way to possibly get there is by finding out what their expectations are. So after asking all of these questions, what I recommend that you do is set your second appointment. And this probably sounds really bizarre to a you. I mean, it's so hard to get the first appointment. You're thinking, I don't want to lose it right now. I want to keep going. Here, I want you to think about. Typically, how often do you make a sale on your first call? If you're like most of the publications and salespeople that I know, typically you do not make a sale on your first call. Typically, what happens on your first call is you ask many fewer questions that I've just recommended. Then what you do is you go through telling them all about your magazine. You give them your media kits and you give them your rates. Think about this. When someone gives you the price of something, what is the next logical outcome? The logical outcome is, okay, I'll buy it. If you're not ready to buy something, the price is always going to be too high. So if you continue most of the time, if you continue with your sale at this stage of the game, you are going to end up giving them all the information they think they need to make a decision. So that when you do follow up with them, they don't accept your phone calls, they don't return your phone calls, they don't return your emails, and they refuse to meet with you. And or they just throw objections at you because they don't think you have anything else to share with them because you've just shared everything they think that they need to know. So what you do is, since the sale is not on the first call, don't take it to where the first call should be. So what you want to do now instead is say something like, I didn't create a slide for this, but this is very critical, so take some notes. At this point, you want to say something like, thank you so much for sharing this time with me. I'm going to analyze all of the information and what we've done for businesses like yours that have been successful. And then what I'll do is come back and share with you some ideas as to how we can help you. Now, remember, I'm going to say increase your sales, but I'm not going to say increase your sales to them. I'm going to look at my notes from what I got over here, and I'm going to use the keywords that they gave me. So I'm going to say, and I'll come back with you with some ideas on how we can help increase your sales or grow your business, but whatever it is they said, so let's set up a time for us to meet and do that now. I'll tell you that if you do it this way, more than 9 times out of 10, you will have your second appointment set on their calendar before you walk out the door. And they will be looking forward to meeting you because you've just promised to come in with ideas on how you can help them. Couple of things. The first is going to be, if when you ask the question, who else is involved in the decision-making process, found out that there is somebody else involved in the decision-making process. Then we modify that closure to say, I'm going to analyze all this information, come back to you with some ideas on how we can help you increase your sales, but you're going to use their hot buttons, their keywords. And then when is a good time for me to come back and meet with you and, now you mention that other person's name. And if they say, oh, no, you don't need to meet with the other person, well, let me tell you why a lot of people like it that way. Because this way, any questions you both have can be answered right away. Otherwise, you're going to take all the stuff that I shared with you and go to the other person, and if he or she has questions, then you're going to have to call me, and then you're going to have to go back to them. So it's so much more work for you, and it's a lot more productive when you can just have all of your questions answered. So if that seems like it makes sense, let's set up an appointment to meet all three of us. Will it work all of the time? No. Nothing works all of the time. Will it work some of the time? Heck, yes. And when it works, you're going to be speaking with people who can say yes rather than people who can only say no. So it's highly, highly effective. There are a lot of questions that are in there, and what I want you to know is, yes, they really, truly will answer all of the questions and not mind one bit. I'm going to share with you a story that I think really hits home the point and explains to you how important this process, this step in the sales process is. And then you were going to build a house. And if you were in this situation, it's probably something that you've dreamed about for a long time, something that you've saved up for. It's something that's just been a long time in the making, because buying a house is one thing, building one is something else. So if you've decided you want to build a house, you're going to start with an architect. And you go to an architect, and the first one you see is well, respected, he's recommended, and he asks you the important questions, like how many bedrooms do you want, how many bathrooms do you want, what style house do you want, how many square feet do you want, what's your budget? So, can I see the land, the survey of the land? So he asks you important questions, and you leave. And you feel like, okay, being professional. Now you go to a second architect, because this is a big deal, so you want to interview more than one person. And the second architect asks you those same questions because he needs to know that information. And then he says, tell me about your family. Like, how do you guys spend your time in the evenings and on the weekends? What are your favorite hobbies? And, how do you enjoy the outside of your house? Or how would you like to? What changes would you like to make in your lifestyle? Are you planning on keeping the furniture you have, or are you going to be buying all new furniture? What are your favorite colors and why? You would leave this architect feeling like, wow, this architect really gets me. And when you feel like someone gets you, then you want to do business with them regardless of money. I cannot tell you how many times rate becomes a non-issue because we're so focused on reaching their goals, their priorities, overcoming their challenges, that, rate becomes a non-issue. Because when you want something, you're willing to pay more for it. When you don't want something, you're almost not willing to pay anything, and that's when advertising becomes a commodity and people just keep negotiating you out of business. I have a new company that I'm working with, and they cannot afford, when their people sell more advertising, they can't even afford the new signature that they need. They're losing money. And I've had other clients like that also. And the reason you get there is because you don't understand that you're not selling price regardless what your competitors are doing. When I shared with you about Jeff earlier and, the quote, that people spending 20 minutes with him, he, when I first started doing business with him, he said, Jenaé, we're the highest in the market and every one of our competitors cuts rates. And I said, I have to tell you, if we work together, I'm going to teach you how to not cut rates, even though everybody in your industry does, and you'll still be the highest in the market. And that's exactly where he is today. His average page rate is growing every single year in this economy, double digits. So this works. What you have to realize, though, is that if you do what you've always done, you're going to get the results you've always gotten. I assume if you're on this call, you're looking for better ways of doing things. So one of the ways of doing it is to keep your fact-finding notes in your portfolio for when you're making sales calls on your desktop so that you can use it on every single new call. When you stop this phase of the process, you're going to just make things a lot more difficult for yourself. There will be a recording of this session on my website, which is magazineadvertisingsales.com. I highly recommend that you listen to it repeatedly. If you would like some other sales ideas, there are a ton of them on my website. And as I'm fond of saying, whether you use my ideas or somebody else's, if sales is important to you, it's like learning the multiplication table. When you learned that, 3 times 4 equals 12, and 4 times 4 equals 16, and 5 times 4 equals 20, you said that over and over and over and over until you finally got it. And sales is the same thing. If it's really important to you to get, you need to listen to sales tapes or CDs or MP3s, whatever, over and over again, every single time you're in your car. So that will be the fastest way for you to grow your sales. And I hope that you have found this very helpful. And I'm going to ask if there are any questions that I can help you out with.
Yeah, I think we just had a couple of questions. It was a little bit different. It was great, a little bit different. It was a lot more of information as far as like the questions and everything. So I think we only had a couple this time. But two that we had, when asking your questions, are you answering as you go on, or are you at a later time? Do you get back to them on everything? As far as yes, we can do that for you.
Oh, yes. Okay. So this is what you do. You don't answer them. The Surgeon General's warning. You're not answering anything at this point. You're just asking questions. So at the end of the session, I recommend 2 calls. I don't recommend presenting your magazine on your first sales call. So when you go back, and I showed you how to do it with one of the pieces of information, and I think that's what I'm doing with the next seminars. I'm going to show you how to take all of this information that you get here and how do you actually conduct your second sales call. What you want to do is take the information, you go back on your second call, and you say, okay, based on what you said to me, your top priorities are A, B, C, and D. And they're going to tell you their top priorities, their challenges, their obstacles. So, and you put them in order of the way you want to address them. So, for example, if increasing their, average revenue per customer were one of them, and you have an affluent market, and you typically talk about your distribution and your circulation first, well, then you put that as the first point. And then you say, well, one of the things you said is you want to increase the amount of business you do with each customer. In order to do that, it seems to me that you need to be reaching the people who earn the most money because they're the ones who have the most money to spend. And these people typically live, and now you list the areas that your publication's distributed in. These people typically live in these areas. So it seems to me these are the people that you want to be reaching, right? And they'll say, yeah, great news. These are people that I'm going to deliver to you to help you be able to achieve this objective. How does that sound to you? So you take their priorities, objectives, and obstacles, make them your bullet points when you go back for your second meeting, and then you show them how you reaffirm what they want to do with the logical way of doing it without talking about your magazine, but talking about what the magazine gives them, the way I just described, and then say, great news, that's exactly what we do for you. How does that sound, which is a check-in question. How does that sound? And when you don't ask checking-in questions, like how does that sound to you, does that seem to meet your needs, when you don't ask them, you never know if you hit it and nailed it or if it's a problem. So you want to make sure to ask those questions, and then when they say, yeah, that sounds perfect, then you will end up at the end of the sales call with something like this. And I remember the first time it happened, it was just so fabulous. You'll end up with, how does that sound? How does that seem to meet your needs? And they'll go, that sounds great. I guess the only thing I really need to know now is how much it is. And that's so different from when you hear, how much is it? Because you know when you hear, how much is it, it's really the beginning of an objection coming where they're going to say, it's too expensive, or I've already spent my money, or something like that. When they say, I guess the only thing I need to know now is how much it is, you're like, you're home. So that's how you use the information. Does that answer your question, David?
Yeah, there's actually kind of a second part to it, I guess, that you might have answered, and I guess it's just not clear for somebody here, is do you go over questions before they're familiar with you or your magazine, or is it?
Okay, like I said, hopefully when you contact somebody, they already are familiar with your magazine. If you don't mail out copies of your magazines to everybody every issue, then at least if you know I want to call these 20 people or these 30 people for this issue coming up, then mail those 20 or 30 people a copy of the magazine before you pick up the phone to call them, or drop it by the store. Don't give them a media kit. I said a copy of the magazine. There's a difference. You want them to get familiar with you. And media kits, first of all, most of them are done completely wrong anyway. But aside from that, media kits are giving them what they think is all the information they need, and then they don't need you. They don't need to have a conversation with you. And media kits are about buying ink on paper. They're not about helping them overcome their challenges and achieve their top priorities. And that's the major difference between a media kit and this sales approach.
And when you've mentioned meeting, I mean, that could be over the phone, correct? These questions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And have you found success in being able to maintain conversation the first time you talk to somebody, or do you mainly use a first phone call to set up a time to talk to somebody?
It really depends. My way of getting to speak with them right away is this verbiage, which I find extremely effective. Did I catch you at a bad time? People like to say no. So if you say, do you have time right now, they're going to say no. If you say, did I catch you at a bad time, they're going to say no. Not always, but more likely, because there's the no inclination. Did I catch you at a bad time? No. Then you explain why you're making the call. And my explanation goes something like this. I'm calling to see if I can help you increase your sales like we've done for companies like yours. If you have a list of one or two names that you can use instead of being vague, be specific, you will be more effective.
And so, initial call, you're saying if it's possible, go ahead and move forward with this first meeting of sorts with the questions.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the conversation goes like, hi, I'm Jenaé. I'm with Name a Magazine. I'm calling to see if I can help you increase your sales like we've done for other companies like yours, or like we've done for some of your competitors. Did I catch you at a bad time?
Okay. Cool.
And if they say no, then you just go ahead. If they say yes, then you schedule a meeting.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. Well,
question.
that's pretty clear. Does anyone else have any other questions? Jenaé, on your end?
Nope. I'm all clear over here. I hope, again, this has been helpful for everybody. If I can help you anymore, my web address is magazineadvertisingsales.com. I do free tips emails. I'm doing them pretty much twice a month now. And if you want some personal coaching, training, or consulting, you've got my contact information. I'll look forward to helping you.
All right. Thanks, Jenaé. Anyone
Thanks,
else?
everybody.
Great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.